Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. And we have a very important show tonight. We're going to be talking to two gentlemen who are running for the position of president of the United Conservative Party of Alberta. That's the party president. The UCP is made up of people who are the members, and the members elect a board, and the board governs how the party operates. And this is really important, more important than many of us had. We couldn't have even imagined how important it was even 5 years ago. We weren't really paying attention to politics like we are now. But it's important in that when the members elect the board and they vote on policy and governance and those types of things within the party, that influences how government runs or how the MLAs behave, or those types of things. It can affect who can be nominated to run as an MLA in a certain constituency, and that can make all the difference for the province. So this is one of those really, really overlooked things that it really needs more attention. And now I'll be going to the AGM, which is coming up at the end of this month. You can still get tickets on the UCP's website. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of really good people there who genuinely care about the province. There are some people there that are there because they want to impose their policies that we don't like as well, which makes it important that the good guys show up. But it's a lot of fun. We get to meet some people. We get to meet some old friends, talk to some people we haven't seen. We get an idea of how the party is functioning and kind of the overall democratic health of the United Conservative Party. So it's a really great thing to attend. And of course, it's not free. There's a cost. It costs money to do it. It's a pretty big deal. But really, we spend hundreds of dollars, some of us, on streaming services, Netflix, Disney Plus, all that garbage that just programs you with things that you don't want to believe. We pay for that for nothing. So paying, $100 or $200, even $300 to be part of something like this once a year, it really is, it's money well spent. And I hope that those of you that are watching this will do everything you can to join us. If you can't afford to go, there are some CAs around the province that do sponsor people. I know my friend Mitch, he is the CA president over in Bonnyville there. They send people there every year. They send a bus to help get people to and from. So if you want to go, you can't afford it, or you need more information, contact your local United Conservative Party constituency association, and they can maybe help you. At the very least, they can give you some details so that you can help yourself. So tonight, we have with us Rob Smith and Daryl Komick. Rob is the president incumbent of the United Conservative Party of Alberta, and Daryl is challenging him. I think there are a couple other challengers, but Daryl and Rob are the front runners as far as I know. They're both friends of mine. They're both fantastic human beings. And, regardless of who wins, I would say that we're going to be in good hands. However, they do have some differences of opinion, different policy ideas, those types of things. And we're bringing them on tonight so that we can discuss it. You can listen, and that will give you the knowledge you need to make a good decision to try and take control of your future in this way. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the president incumbent of the United Conservative Party of Alberta Board of Directors and his challenger, Mr. Daryl Komick, who I will actually move up to the top because you're way more important than me tonight. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, it's nice to be here. It's fun because Rob and I, we squared off on Monday at the Cowtown Showdown, and I think the classic photo has Rob and I with our dukes up, right? So we're kind of laughing to each other because it was it was a great photo. It reminded us of like a Tyson fight, but I think everyone has to realize that Rob and I are both blue, and so the question is it's nuance, and I think you have to understand that, and we certainly have different viewpoints. Which the great thing about the United Conservative Party is it allows us to have different viewpoints. That's kind of the whole thing. It's a party of thinkers, and by having these different views, we make for a richer province, and certainly we're looking forward to squaring off.
Right on. So before we get too far into it, why don't we just take a few minutes to have you guys introduce yourselves? And we're going to start with Rob. He's the incumbent. And Daryl, you already got the first word. So we'll let Rob introduce himself. Try and keep it, 2 or 3 minutes or less if you can. And then Daryl will move over to you, and then we'll get right into it.
Sure. Well, thanks very much, Chris. And thanks for having both Daryl and I here. My name is Rob Smith. Central Alberta has been my home since I was less than 2 years old, and I'm currently on our farm, our family farm here between Olds and Sundre. The Olds Didsbury Three Hills constituency is where I live provincially, and Ponoka Didsbury is what my federal EDA is. And I have been involved with politics from the time I turned 14. I was able to buy my youth memberships at the age of 14 in 1982 in both the federal and provincial Conservative parties at that time. And so I've been often on boards through the years. Starting in about 2010, I wanted to get involved in a really profound way. I'd been involved with campaigns and whatnot before, but then started running some of the local Conservative campaigns, was a driver of the merger of our local Wild Rose and Progressive Conservative parties. I was from the Progressive Conservative side, but we actually had Wild Rose representation. So I was very happy to defer to the leadership of Wild Rose, but certainly support them as secretary for the first few years that we were together in the United Conservative Party, before then becoming our local CA president, and then wanted to become involved with the provincial board. And I've really enjoyed the 2 years on the provincial board. I feel like we are a more united party. I think maybe not due to any reason other than just time and the fact that we've been able to spend more time together and get to know one another better province-wide, and still recognize the importance of unity going forward. And the reason why I want to do a second term is that we have an election in October 2027. And it's really, really important to me that we stay united and we stay committed to spreading our Conservative brand province-wide and ensuring that Calgary ends up majority blue, majority Conservative, and in fact, strongly majority. I'd like to see it more in the range of 3/4 UCP seats, and that we get some kind of a foothold in Edmonton. My objective is actually 5 seats. If we could do better than that, that'd be great. And I just want to be able to help guide our party through that October 2027 larger victory than what we had in 2023.
Well, and that's very honorable. I will chime in here and I'll say I would like to take a political tide pen and wipe the orange stain completely from this province. I don't want to see 75% blue. I want all the orange to be gone. So hopefully we can create a very effective tide pen and get rid of that stain on our province in this next election. Daryl.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, I'm certainly actively involved. I'm the president here of the Calgary Lougheed CA Association. We took it over. Jason Kenney was our MLA. We took over the CA and worked and got Eric Bouchard nominated and subsequently elected as the MLA here. It's a lot of work in the city. I am from Calgary, and certainly I'm based here. I've lived across Alberta. I've been blessed that way. I've been up in Vermilion. I've been over to Edmonton. I've been down to Sylvan Lake. So I've had a good cross section of what goes on out there. I'm from rural Alberta, but I live in the city. I think for me, we have a very active CA in Lougheed, and we're trying to be demonstrative and demonstrate to people exactly how you can be go all out 52 weeks a year and every year in between elections. So we're definitely principled conservatives where I come from. RCA, we tackle social issues with town halls. We were the very first to kind of come up with the Cowtown Showdown 3 years ago, which would put a spotlight on constituency association presidents or the board to be elected. And then we got into topics of concern to people. Our most popular two were, of course, Injection of Truth 1 and Injection of Truth 2, which really addressed issues of the COVID lockdowns and vaccines and its effectiveness. And we posed a lot of questions and we found a lot of answers. I think we never assumed that we knew the answers at the beginning. We just worked through it. And because we advocate for party policy in Calgary Lougheed, we've also tackled Let Kids Be Kids. We've talked about all this pornography that was in school. This was 2.5 years ago. We're talking about this. And wow, suddenly someone went, well, there's child porn in school. Well, yeah, if you were listening earlier, you wouldn't have had to wait so long. We talked about Better Deal by Billions, which was about what it meant to have an Alberta pension. And we try to do these with an objective view, showing a cross-section of perspectives so people can be informed. And of course, our most recent event, The Courage to Listen, it's certainly focused on a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, and could we build a framework for that? And our output after our event was an 81-page manual on how to have a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada or without a united Canada. It doesn't actually really matter, because you have to do all the steps that we discovered in the framework anyway. Mm-hmm. So we're very outgoing. We have a plan here in Lougheed. We door knock every second week. So when it comes to engagement and getting feedback from our members and people in our constituency, we know. And my wife and I, we have a small business that we operate a food hall and a grocery store. We deal with 40 small businesses. A lot of them are immigrants. We have people from 26 different countries that work for us or with us. And we support 275 local producers. So I often hear people talk about this urban-rural divide, and I don't believe it. I think that that's an excuse for not engaging yourself. One thing you will find, there are differences, and you have to understand the nuances. Rural Alberta tends to be a little more homogeneous. It's a little more heterogeneous, or there's a little more variety in the city. But that doesn't mean that conservative values shouldn't be advocated for every day. And so we like to walk the talk. We like to talk about, and we'll talk to anybody about faith, family, freedoms, free enterprise, fiscal accountability, and of course, charity. So those are kind of value propositions that conservatives share, and that we can find a lot of common ground, probably 80%. So for us, for me, getting involved here, certainly to raise the profile of the United Conservative Party of Alberta, but also on having some subtle differences on how we see it being managed.
So you men have both been quite involved. Rob, maybe a little longer, but certainly Daryl, you've been heavily involved in doing a lot of things in the last few years. I remember coming down and seeing your food hall, and I tell you folks, when you open the doors of that place and you walk in there, if you're someone like me that can't walk past the donut, it's like you've died and gone to heaven. That place is absolutely, it's fantastic. You've done a wonderful job there. So we hear the word unity being thrown around a lot. We hear it in federal politics, we hear it in provincial politics, and now we're hearing it in party politics. So, Rob, what's your take on that? What does that mean to you, and is it something that you believe that can be accomplished in today's world where the divides are like the Grand Canyon?
It's a great point that you make, Chris, and I think that one of the things that we see in today's political sphere globally is that, and maybe it goes beyond politics, maybe it actually goes into the social atmosphere as well, that someone who you don't agree with 100% is now all of a sudden your adversary and at best, and maybe your enemy at worst. I think that one of the things that's important to me about unity is recognizing that, and I know this seems a little colloquial, but it's fact. When conservatives stay together, we win. And when we split up, we lose. We saw that federally, and it put us, from a conservative perspective, into no man's land for 12 or 13 years, from the early 1990s to the kind of mid 2000s. And we saw exactly what had happened to our province, and it made a devastating effect on us from 2015 to 2019, when we ended up with an NDP government. And so it is important to me that we find the commonalities. And I believe Daryl is 100% correct that I'm not even, maybe quite as liberal as what Daryl is, in terms of him saying we agree on 80% of stuff. I'm okay with recognizing that we can find common ground on 60% of the stuff, or 7 out of 10 things, and that's enough to move forward. But as we are now 2 years to our provincial election in October 2027, it is of critical importance to me that we ensure that all of our members are feeling that the Conservative Party is working for all of them. And so what I will say, Chris, and because I'm sure you're going to get to this point, but I'll maybe pull it out right off the bat, and it's probably one of the bigger differences between where Daryl and I are in terms of our commitment to unity, is that while I think both of us are 100% supportive of an independent Alberta, I think that Daryl believes that the party needs to be taking action as a United Conservative Party right now to ensure that there is a positive outcome on a referendum vote that would ultimately be leading to a decision that would say, on the behalf of the majority of Albertans, that Alberta should be independent. And I'm a believer that until such time as Albertans have spoken and said what they want, the party should actually stay out of it, both for the sake of party unity, because we recognize that we've got somewhere between a quarter and a third of our members who at this point in time are not yet on the page of thinking a united or an independent Alberta is in our best interest. But then the other aspect of it is, and this is representing some of the members, my fellow current members of the provincial board, that believe that the minute that party becomes involved with the question of independence, it actually could damage the positive outcome of a referendum from Albertans that say, yes, in fact, we want to leave and we want to stand on our own, because there are an awful lot of Albertans that would be open to the idea of going to, say, an Alberta Prosperity Project seminar and learning, like we know happens at almost every single one of those events that takes place, whether it was formerly the question about the Alberta pension plan and now the question about an independent Alberta. Like, I think Mitch Sylvester estimates 96+% of the people that leave those events are on the page of saying, yes, in fact, we do need to be independent. But if a political party gets involved and says, we got to do this, there might be people that don't even go to those grassroots oriented events like what APP puts on, because a political party's got involved and they said, no, we don't agree with anything that the UCP are after. Therefore, we're not even going to talk about this now. And so that's I think one of the main differences between Daryl and my candidacy.
Well, and I think, just to speak to Rob's point there, I mean, I'm on a bit of a rescue mission for party unity, because, this is a united coalition of conservatives. To say that it's we're all the same, again, free thinkers, we're very good at coming up with solutions to problems. But, we have demonstrated in Calgary-Lougheed that you can have the discussion. And what I'm advocating is to have the discussion about sovereignty. We've proven that you can do it in Calgary-Lougheed. We had very respectful discussion. It wasn't all one way. It wasn't all the other way. We had various points of view put out there. In fact, half of the document that we put out is called Canada First, the sovereign Alberta within United Canada. And the second half of it says the value of freedoms, which talks about, once you get through the first 28 steps that you got to get to, what next? And why not spend our $70 billion at home rather than give it to Ottawa? And, party unity to me ties into this whole idea of representing a large segment of our association. And to have the discussion is not a choice. To have the discussion says that we will have the discussion. I mean, it's the number one topic on everybody's lips. I mean, Thomas Oskazek, a former PC, one of the first NDP deputy ministers under Redford, went and collected 450,000 signatures, none of which now he doesn't want a referendum on the topic because it's proof enough that there's 450,000 people that want to stay Alberta to stay in Canada. Well, none of those signatures are validated. He went to the court, had it, basically he could just collect names on a sheet of paper, any piece of toilet paper that he could get, he collected a name on, and they put it together. So there's 450 people right there that may or may not be party members. I don't know. Then we have a vast group of organized people that say, hey, let's have the discussion. Maybe reference Mitch and EPP. They're doing a heck of a good job educating people. But to show these cross sections is important because it's the elephant in the room. And, I'm not the guy to kick the can down the road. I think that if you got issues, you got to deal with them today. So therefore you can have some resolve because you know what, there's going to be more political issues tomorrow. And so there's a large group of grassroots coalition within our party that says we're not heard and we're not being heard and that they need to be heard. And, Rob alluded to that. That's somewhere between 65 and 70%, 75% of our party. Well, that's a pretty good section. So why not allow us to have a lively discussion that shows multiple perspectives? And so that leads into where I kind of go with the whole idea of Alberta First. We have to have Alberta First. Look at the ruling that just happened with, child pornography, and there's no minimum census. 5-4 Supreme Court. Supreme Court votes to get rid of ostriches. I mean, these are some of the most important research birds on the planet to help with avian flu. They solved avian flu themselves with herd immunity, and they have special qualities that should have been studied. There's a $2 million in a fund in British Columbia to help reduce avian flu in British Columbia. Why didn't the British Columbian government step in and say, hey, we should save these ostriches so we can study them? And by the way, we have a pool of money to help solve this problem because we've had to kill like 8 million birds in the recent future. So when we talk about Alberta First, we have to look at unity. Unity is essential and to be unified, but that also means you can't just keep kicking the can and hoping for the future.
Unity it's a tricky thing because, I once heard a wise man say, when people stop talking and stop having discussions, bad things happen. And a bad thing happened to him. And when that happened, it shifted my worldview to be much less concerned about being unified and more concerned about standing on principle and morals. There are some things that I will never be unified with another person on, and that is like, men going in the women's washroom. Sorry, no, I'm not going to unify with you on that. I'm not going to be unified with the NDP or anyone who believes that we should be allowing children to undergo surgical procedures before they're even old enough to vote, changing their entire lives. I won't. So there is a difference between being unified and standing on principles together. The second, that actually requires a lot of education and almost revival in society, right? To get back to a place where we want to do the right thing, we're asking to do the right thing. And in this case, you both mentioned the Alberta Prosperity Project. That's their job, is to educate Albertans as to the merits, benefits, and rationale of Alberta independence. And you pointed out, Rob, and I've seen this myself because I speak at those events as well. When the education's done and people leave the room, it's a very, very high conversion rate, very high, like high 90s. And the reason is because in that situation, if you can separate your feelings from the facts win every time, and it's a no-brainer. But we're fighting feelings, and we see that in the party as well. More, less about the facts and more about the feelings. So, Rob, how do you plan to, tackle that from within the party? Like, what direction do you see the party and the board going that would deal with both of those things? Not just the unity, but what we're unifying on. How do we get back to a place where we encourage people to want to do the right thing so we can unify with them?
But Chris, there's a bit of a challenge with your logic there, because you're saying that what's right is absolute. And there is no question that when we're talking about the issue of independence, that is a subjective issue. And we have, like I said, somewhere between a quarter and a third of our members at this point in time that I think are not just opposed to it, they're vehemently opposed to it. Uh, and I think that even perhaps as much as 70% of our, well, I'm even giving up to 75% of our members that I think may be pro-independence, they also recognize that the party taking a position on it is actually trying to make the horse that we're leading to water to drink. And I think that our job as a party is to support all of our members. You've identified a few issues there, biological men and women's washrooms. We have commonality on that almost across the board. But something as fundamental or as foundational as independence, I mean, in all of our lifetimes, I think in our parents' or our grandparents' lifetimes, that would be the single biggest structural change, political, social change that would happen with Alberta. I think that it's incumbent on the United Conservative Party to follow what Albertans have to say, but I would also suggest to not stand in the way at all of the educational mechanisms that are actually moving the needle on that, like the Alberta Prosperity Project. When the government was talking about an Alberta pension plan, it was kind of dead in the water. And so the government got out of that business in the fall of 2023. The Alberta Prosperity Project picked up the mantle. And what happened? 18 months later, more than half of Albertans are now in favor of an Alberta Prosperity Project. I am fully committed, and I believe absolutely that the work that the Alberta Prosperity Project is doing with that education, exactly what you just said, Chris, is what will lead to a positive referendum that would lead to an independent Alberta. And it's the job of the United Conservative Party to stay out of that until such time as Albertans have spoken. And then, if the majority of Albertans have spoken and said, we want an independent Alberta, then I think the party needs to have the discussion amongst ourselves. And I think we all know how this would go. Are we now an independence party? At this point in time, we aren't an independence party. And I mean, just like Premier Smith doesn't have a government with an independence mandate. But would the premier be open to being a premier with an independence mandate? I believe if Albertans speak in favor of that, and I think that we all think there's a very good possibility that they will, I'm convinced that premier will go along with that, as the party would as well. But leading up to that, if we try to impose the concept of independence on our membership, I feel very confident, Chris and Daryl, that would put unity absolutely asunder, and that group of let's call them somewhere between a quarter and a third would end up finding a home elsewhere, or at least they'd find a home outside of UCP, and they wouldn't show up to vote the next time we go to the polls. And that would
but
lead us to
this is of course is where Rob and I disagree, because
Sorry,
I'm not.
just one sec, Daryl. I got to interrupt for a second, and I'll come right back to you. But I just have one question for you, Rob. You mentioned that about a third to a quarter of the party is quite opposed to Alberta independence. How do you not disrespect or how do you avoid disrespecting the 75% who are on board with the idea, by not allowing the conversation to happen within the party? I understand that we want to include, and we are a big tent party, and we want to include those people that are opposed. But what about the people who feel disrespected for being shut down on even just having the conversation?
Well, I guess I'm not really sure why there's this talk about censorship, or there's this talk about being shut down. I was the one who had the idea for the sovereignty session. I thought it was a good idea. I talked about it for months. The board of directors ultimately felt that they didn't think that that was in the best interest of the membership or the best interest of the AGM. And the reason why, Chris, is the answer to your question. What is the upside? We are likely not that between a quarter and a third of our members going to change their mind on their belief in federalism or their lack of belief in independence. So the idea of putting Mitch Sylvester on the stage at our AGM, if it's not actually going to lead to a positive outcome for the party, other than making the people that are already motivated by independence feel like they have the opportunity to stand up and rah, 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 and intimidate that quarter to a third, I don't see the upside to that. And I don't consider that to be creating any kind of a disincentive or a disadvantage for what we believe are the majority of our members who favor independence. This is
So
entirely about them getting their objective of an outcome from a referendum that would lead to independence.
So when we follow Rob's logic, it doesn't really wash, and this is where we disagree. I'm saying let's have the discussion. So what is the upside? Just to give you an upside of what that is. So maybe it's not 75% after the AGM. Maybe it's 90%. Maybe 90% of the representation, which I believe that the AGM is representative of our membership, says, you know what, now I am better informed. I got the picture, and we get to see what that is. The party itself isn't taking a position one way or the other. The party's saying, let's have the conversation. I mean, if Thomas Lasceza can get up on the stage and he can give people his argument for Alberta within Canada, terrific. But then let's put Ben Trudeau up on the stage and let's have Ben talk about what's required to work within 28 different areas to make Alberta better positioned within a sovereign Alberta in the United Canada. And then let's give another perspective. I mean, I'm in the APP perspective. So I'm just saying that there is multiple perspectives. And so the tricky part is that I remember being the 7% and not being heard. And we were told, well, the majority doesn't want to hear your voice. Okay. So then we got to be the 25% on other topics, not just necessarily having the topic on sovereignty. When we stopped talking about child porn in schools, I mean, we were like so far off the spectrum. We were like in the 2 or 3 percentile. And people are going, well, why are you talking about that? I mean, the party disqualified a candidate down in Lethbridge in the previous election because she was bringing up this issue of what was going on in schools. So, the issue existed then, and it was a small percentage. But if it wasn't for the party itself educating its members, and that's really what policies are about, you don't just write them. You have to write them and educate them. And in Lockheed, we've always been cognizant of the fact that we are United Conservatives, and we work very consistent with making sure that we were within the party policies, because those policies can't just collect dust. I would rather give action for hope than hoping for action. And I think the vast majority of people now in this issue talking about sovereignty is they want to see some action for hope. And they're tired. I mean, we've been through a lot of change and turmoil in Canada for a variety of reasons. We look at the trucker convoy, we look at lockdowns, we look at what's going on with ostriches again. We're just tired of this whole idea of being gaslit. And we have a very motivated percentage of our party, let's call it 75% using Rob's number, that say, look, let's have the conversation. Let me sit with somebody who may not be so sure, and let's listen. And then I can talk to them, and then they can talk to me, and we can maybe exchange some ideas. And if we are really a party that exchanges the tough ideas and the good ideas, then we shouldn't be afraid. And I mean, to Rob's credit, last year with the Alberta Bill of Rights, I mean, this was a big deal. Now, the government boffed that. I mean, they basically took it and took away rights by what they did. And my analogy has always been, look, freedoms are like hockey cards. You got to collect the hockey cards because you never know which hockey card is going to have value 10 years from now. And so having the conversation and collecting freedoms means that you will do the hard thing. The party did the good thing last year. They exposed the fact that our own government refused to create a Bill of Rights and follow up on various issues that actually dealt with what Albertans were saying. They failed. The party said, this is not good enough. And I was in the room. It was like 90%.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey, 50-50 on we should talk about what our freedom should be in Alberta. It says we are conservatives in Alberta. We got to put Alberta first. When we put Alberta first, it means we collect as many freedoms as possible. Freedoms for property, freedoms for self, freedoms for medical autonomy, without condition of the federal government. And that's what happened is it got watered down. So that in and of itself reveals where people are at. And basically, the can got kicked on freedoms. And people noticed that. So now we're coming around. Rob's right about the pension plan. When the government operated the PR, it was poorly done. But when you listen to what they said, it was poorly done from the beginning. They spent a lot of money on stuff that they didn't even realize to go talk to the pensioner and say, by the way, there's three parts to your pension. There's a Canada pension plan, there's old age security, and there's income supplement. These social programs of the federal government, Alberta pays for. We're paying in 9 million or 9 billion and we're getting out 6 billion. Where's our 3 billion? And they come up with a number somewhere between 150 and 400 billion dollars. Well, if you take just the interest on that 400 billion dollars, if Alberta was running that, we could have so many more benefits for our seniors that are struggling with affordability. And people want more money. Well, we've got to be finding ways of either reducing the cost of society or finding ways of increasing people's money that is not just inflationary, that it's real. So we're getting on another topic and another one other than sovereignty, but there's a lot of responsibility to educate our members about these policies. And I think we've proven in Calgary-Lougheed that there's a place for it. You can do it respectfully. You can ask the Socratic question to make sure that people understand where you're coming from, that you're not passing judgment on it, but you're actually out there to try to educate people. And this is essential in today's world.
So I appreciate both of your guys' positions, and they're both valid. Now, Daryl, kind of going along with what Rob said, consider the quarter to a third of the party that currently are very opposed. If you were president of the party and you were pushing to have these types of conversations open within the party, how would you protect the integrity of the party and make sure that it isn't fractured to the point where we can no longer form an effective government?
Well, the coalition of conservatives that we have means that you have to be willing to listen from all the corners of the conservatives. I mean, everyone's saying, well, what happens if that 1/3 or 25% leaves? What happens if the 75 or 80% leaves? Like, then what? Then what kind of party?
Either way we lose. Either way we lose.
But I think having the conversation in a respectful way shows both sides of the equation that there is common ground. And I think finding the common ground is incredibly important. And we need to demonstrate that through action.
Daryl, with due respect, and you know that I'm a huge fan of Calgary-Lougheed, but if you talk to people in Calgary-Beddington, Calgary-Buller-McCall, Bow, Cross, Curry, East, Edgemont, Elbow, and Falconridge, I keep going down the list, how many of them believe that your Calgary-Lougheed approach is the right approach?
I think a good portion of people believe that having the dialogue is the right approach. I think that approach is supported because people try to emulate what we're doing.
Then why don't they come to your events? And why do they actually say that Calgary-Lougheed makes it hard for them to maintain their existing MLA and will make it hard for them to elect a UCP MLA over an NDP MLA? And they say it. I hear it from them all the time. That's why this is such a critical issue.
And of course, it's critical in order to demonstrate demonstratively that we are conservatives. And so if we can't demonstrate the value of conservative values, then we're just, we're lukewarm something else. And I think, if you compare how we would go about it in Lougheed to say even Calgary West, which is Mike Ellis's, two different approaches. Our approach is no less successful than his approach. And I think you have to look at that. There is multiple solutions within the party for how to run a CA, but always engagement. These are places that are engaged. And when you talk to your point, when I go down that list of CAs that you're talking about, are they door knocking? Are they out there? Are they engaging their community? Are they integrated? Do they represent all of the different groups that are in their CAs? The answer to your question is no. And that's the tricky part. When I go and talk to people in Calgary Elbow, the people that are out door knocking right now, they say, hey, we find great success talking about conservative values. Or I talk to people in Calgary Acadia, the same thing, or Calgary Glenmore. So they're Banff Kananaskis. So the idea of being only one way, I'm not suggesting that there's only one way. I'm saying that there's some great formulas of success, and that those formulas of success always involve engaging in the dialogue.
100% that's true. But what I'm hearing you say is that your approach is a better approach than it is in Foothills and Hayes and Klein and Mountain View. And Daryl, I categorically disagree with that statement.
Well,
At the
and I'm not
highest
saying
level
actually
of
this is probably a watershed moment. I'm not suggesting that the Calgary Lougheed way is the only way. I said that very clear. I said there's multiple ways of doing it. So people need to find their rhythm to do it. But Rob, what you're overlooking is, are they doing it? And I think that's the issue. Are they out there? Are they engaging? Can they actually identify the vote in their CA? The answer to that question is maybe, but my guess to that is no. So I want to see that CAs are engaged, and whether it's a formula that we have, or it's a formula that comes from Red Deer South, or if it's something that comes from, Strathmore, or it comes from Highwood. Like, RCAs need to be engaged, and that to me is mission critical to all this. And the idea of it only being about sovereignty, it isn't just about sovereignty. We look at the teachers' strike. Like, if we have strong CAs, and this gets to my point about being member centric, if we have strong CAs that are active day in and day out, every day, 52 weeks of the year, we would naturally have a defense shield against the political ideology that's going on about these recall MLA program. I mean, this is an ideological war. This isn't about competency of MLAs. That isn't what was intended by the recall. But what do we got? We need some defense against stupid. And I think having really strong CAs that can get out there and support their MLA, when you have this ideological warfare that's being promoted by unions under the auspices of the NDP, I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I think most people are starting to see through that. It's the recall thing is a hugely organized event. It isn't some random people talking about a few disgruntled MLAs. It's not. They are out there trying to take down the government on something that actually doesn't mean anything in between elections. And the use of the notwithstanding clause, I mean, I can defend this, and I'm not a big fan of the use of it, but I understand. I just, can we risk having the federal judges rule against putting your kids back to school instead of using the kids as a battering ram for the issues of the ATA? No, we can't afford that. We can't afford to be using this poison amongst children and parents to say that the government's not doing a good job. Most of that responsibility falls on school boards. I mean, that's where a lot of the problem comes in. Class size, yeah, we have other issues and why that is. I think the government itself committed to 3,000 more teachers. But I don't know, Chris, you're small business. Can you just ask for a 12% increase, or what was actually a 31% increase, so that you have more profits? No. So we have to have a realistic approach.
Daryl, this argument that you're making right now, while I don't know that anyone would disagree with it, this isn't actually a function of the UCP Board of Directors. You're making an argument for why you should perhaps be the leader of the party or to be an MLA. We don't have discussions about that as the UCP board because that isn't within our purview. And I'm not trying to kick that can down the road. I'm just recognizing what the governance model is, what the government and executive committee does, what caucus does, what the constituency associations do, and what we as a provincial board of directors do. And all the things that you're just mentioning are among the things that you like to take a position on that actually threatens some of the other folks within Calgary, that actually makes them feel like your perspective and Calgary Lougheed's approach makes it difficult for them to have what they identify as their level of conservatism or their conservative practices be successful moving forward. And I think it's not fair for you to say that, are they door knocking and being successful? Maybe. I think we recognize we have to support our CAs for sure. But I think that the places where we have an existing sitting MLA, I mean, they did things as right as Calgary Lougheed did, and we can't discount that fact.
I'm not suggesting they didn't do something right, Rob, and I think painting it in that way isn't where I'm at. What I'm saying quite clearly is that engagement of members, engagement of the community is essential, and how people go about doing that for these relative issues is important. And are people prepared to back it up? Are they prepared to walk the talk? And yes, there's victories, but there was a lot of losses. There was a lot of near misses, and why were there near misses? We got to assess that, and we got to assess, hey, look, how can we go about the strategy? I mean, I was part of the committee that came up with the strategy for the upcoming election, to which the board approved, and looking through that engagement. And that was a hotly contested committee because there's a lot of different perspectives about it. And I think at the end of the day, despite the hot conversations, at the end of the day, it was a very robust plan, and the plan in and of itself really considered all types of different approaches to electioneering. So I'm not characterizing that any of the Calgary CAs haven't done their part and haven't worked hard enough to get what they've got. I think what I'm suggesting is that if we're going to be assertive, if we're going to win, we're going to have to be assertive. We can't be passive.
But not on the question of independence, not at this point, not until Albertans have spoken, because I'm going to tell you what most of your fellow Calgary CA presidents say, and it is the vast majority of them. There's 26, and 17 of them have said this to me. If the party takes a position, even in terms of allowing for the information sharing on independence that associates us with a movement that ends up getting the doors slammed in their faces when they're out door knocking. And that's the reason the board made the decision that it is. It's nothing against independence. I think that I've said how many times that I think that as many as 75% of our party may support that. But in terms of keeping our party together and ensuring a victory in 2027, we need to let Albertans speak on independence first. We as a party then follow that up, because this isn't about biological men and women's washrooms. This isn't even about the availability of COVID vaccination shots. This is far, far, far more fundamental and foundational than that. And to talk about that as the same type of a topic that you would talk about in the various things that Calgary Lougheed has done in the past, or the policies that we pass at our AGM, is not understanding just how emotional and that this topic is to an awful lot of Albertans, until such time as APP can do their work and others can do their work to make it be a rational decision as opposed to emotional. And that's what the party supports, letting the grassroots do this work, letting APP do their work, and hoping that we ultimately have a referendum that will lead to Alberta independence, but the party not pushing it in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I think
just 1 second, Daryl. Rob, here's a thing. You mentioned that it's talking about it is a very emotional subject. I've heard from a lot of people that the status quo, even considering allowing the status quo to continue, is a very emotional topic. How would you respond to that? And considering that could be 75% of the party, that's a pretty serious thing.
I would agree with that statement, Chris. And I think that even the 25 to 33% aren't wanting status quo. I don't think anybody wants status quo. But I think that what the 25 to 33% of our own members are saying is, let's just see what Premier Smith can come up with. And I actually believe that we will see, as time goes by, where those people that are saying that Premier Smith is a 100% federalist and she does not want independence, I think those folks are going to be delightfully surprised to learn that that is not the case. But I think that she believes that she is making incremental movements to try to assert Alberta's own self-governance and self-regulation within Canada that could ultimately lead to independence. But the 25 to 33% of our members, I think that's who she is being mindful of, thinking that that's the majority of Albertans, that she's wanting to make sure that these folks are feeling like they are moving along on an incremental basis, not as fast, I totally understand, as the up to 3/4 of our members, but I don't think that the 3/4 of our members should be feeling like they're being left out, because I think that every day that passes, Alberta gets closer to being an independent province. And I think you just need to look at sometimes even the language that the Premier is using when she talks about these negotiations. In the second week of September, when she met with Carney, it was all really very positive, very upbeat, very nice. I think we're going to get moving forward. If you listen to what the Premier has said every week since then, to me, the language has gotten stronger. The position has gotten a little bit firmer. And I think that as we get past this Grey Cup weekend and the 6 weeks passes, or 6 months passes next week from the March deadline that she put in place, and we get to our AGM, I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what our Premier says. If some folks are right that she's just wanting to kick this can down the road. I believe that the majority of our party are going to kick and scream in a vociferous way. And I feel like there'll be an awful lot of us that are along with them. But I think that the more moderate approach to it, the more incremental approach to it, is where the majority of Albertans are at, and it's where our premier's at. And I think that we have to be respectful of those folks, in addition to the others, recognizing that we are moving towards independence. There's no question about it. Every seminar that the APP runs, we are that much closer to independence.
Yeah. Well, I can't say that I've ever been looking forward to Grey Cup, but this is one of those times. And that's coming up pretty quick. Daryl, back to you.
Well, I think, Rob, he's kind of tainted what I'm really saying. And I think you got to be clear. I'm just saying that the conversation needs to occur. And I'm not saying that the premier isn't articulating a position that's a strong one. But we've heard her position before. We heard Lockheed have the same position. It's not like this position with Ottawa has changed any in 40 years or 50 years. I mean, whatever that history is going back to the West being disgruntled with Ottawa. So, I mean, this is the modern day version of trying to ask Ottawa to be fair and reasonable. And, I didn't hear today's Thursday, I didn't hear today that there was any major breakthrough on nation building projects. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some soft MOU of some pipeline hope that maybe sometime it will move forward in the future. But that seems to be like kicking the can. I mean, and I understand the need for the diplomacy. That is the premier's job. She is our diplomat, and she's out there working in the best interests of Alberta. And I believe much of her work is to put Alberta first. So I agree totally with the idea that we have to make progress. I'm just suggesting, again, that having the dialogue for the vast majority, 75%, I mean, if you got 75% on the exam, you'd be pretty excited in school, that having the dialogue is not harmful. Having the dialogue means that you are engaging. And by having this dialogue, you actually can create unity, because it means that the elephant in the room is having a discussion. And I think that's important.
Okay, Rob, I know you have another commitment coming up here in about 40 minutes, so we're only going to go probably another 15 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, not much, and respecting your time. But let's get it back to like the party politics. I mean, we've talked quite broadly about some of the issues that Alberta's facing. Let's bring this back to party policy and party politics, and I want you to explain exactly why you've taken the position you have, again, because I'm watching the comments and people are concerned that the discussion's not being allowed, and they don't agree with that. Just why don't you just try and touch on that a little bit?
Sure. The reason why I wanted to be the president of the party, Chris, is because I've been in leadership positions my entire life. I've been a representative going back to elementary school. It's honestly, I think, my calling. And when Albert Van Heerden beat me to be the Southern Director in 2022, as I was visiting with people at the AGM, we were at the River Cree in Edmonton that year. I actually decided that I was going to run for president. And the reason why I was going to was a little bit twofold. One, I felt like I would be able to represent our membership in a very, very strong way. And I believe that I have very much done that. And the second aspect of that is that honestly, there were some things that I felt the party did when it came to candidate selection the last time around that as the president of Old Didsbury Three Hills, I had members of our local Old Didsbury Three Hills board who said, we got to push back against this. We do not believe that what happened with some candidate disqualification after their local nomination deadline had passed and before anything could be done about that, and leading then to acclamations, was at all proper. And there's three examples where this came out, and I'm not going to talk about them because I think we all know what they are. But one of the primary reasons why I ran in 2023 was to ensure that we would be able to have fair, open, transparent nominations. And that's absolutely something that I'm committed to as we move forward. In the next year and a half, we're going to have probably 89 candidate selection processes, and it all happens at the local level. And there is also, however, a provincial element of that. And I want to be involved with that, because what happened last time can't happen again. Now, one of the things that I ran on was talking about pre-screening, which a delightful surprise. The very first conversation I had with Premier Smith the morning after the members trusted me to become the president of the party, she actually talked about pre-screening of candidates. And so I'm hoping that that practice alone will ensure that the disqualifications that took place last time of a couple of people that were actually elected to their county council, one of which was a Reeve, and those elections took place after the apparent social media indiscretions that led to them being removed as candidates. So their neighbors picked them to be members of local municipal council, but the party ultimately said that because of stuff that was posted or links or whatever on their social media prior to that was a reason why they couldn't stand. I believe that the process we've got in place now for pre-screening will ensure that none of that happens. But I'd still like to be around just to make sure that there is nothing at all questionable that happens when it comes to candidate selection, because our members deserve to get who it is they want that they get to vote for. And I stand for that very, very strongly.
Well, I gotta throw this out there. If you don't want candidates screened like that, what about conversations?
Conversation. Well, so this is something that I think that you guys aren't necessarily picking up what I'm laying down. Conversations about independence are just fine. Daryl and Calgary Lougheed, if they wanted to have an event about independence, they actually had one. And I thought it was excellent. The premier even said to me, she thought it was excellent. The challenge here is that when you're saying we need to be able to have the conversation, what I'm saying that the board decided is there isn't an upside to it, because you're not going to convince any of that other third to a quarter of the people in the room. So there's no point in having it. The conversations are happening. They're happening every day in coffee shops. They're happening every day at our CA meetings. And so no one that is a freedom-minded person, no one that's an independence-minded person, unless it's the will of their local constituency association members not to elect them, is going to have any barriers to trying to enter a race to become a candidate for the UCP party in the next provincial election. In fact, I think there'll probably be a lot of them that are.
Well, that's fair enough, and I appreciate you saying that, because that's something that I've heard from people, is that they're concerned that the party itself would actually block candidates that were open about that. So it's good to hear you say that.
Absolutely not. That wouldn't be a factor at all.
That's good to hear. Daryl, now let's come back to party politics and party policy.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on Rob's point here about candidate selection, because that's essential under election readiness and one of the important points of mine. I think that the party has done a lot of good groundwork. Rob's leadership has provided good groundwork for that type of transparency. I worry now about the assertiveness of being able to say no to candidates that aren't, or candidates that are. So this whole idea of having the discussion about the candidates is going to become essential. And are those candidates going to represent the values of the party, or are those candidates going to be how will we actually gauge whether they represent the values of the United Conservative Party? Are we running liberals or socialists in ridings just to win them, and then ultimately having that type of influence on government later? That really is a question that we got to put out there. But as far as transparency, I mean, I was not part of a CA that had someone disqualified. Although during the election, our own people tried to disqualify our own candidate for all kinds of crazy reasons, and that came from within. So, I've been through the ringer on this particular point in some way. I mean, I've talked to some of those disqualified candidates who were brilliant, and we are a party that will stand up for things. We are people that will stand up for things. There's going to be things spoken in social media that will not appeal to the NDP. They won't maybe even appeal to the Liberals that are voting, because they are speaking up to represent their own personal values. And, that whole freedom of speech element, that when we start to censor them, it becomes very dangerous. And for me, I'm willing to take it a step further than maybe Rob. Rob has a very good handle on this, but I've learned a lot from him on this whole topic of party candidate selection. I respect that immensely. But having the firm hand on the candidates is essential. Yes, we want to win the election, but I think that we have to also win the election on the value of what the UCP stands for.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left. So, Daryl, or pardon me, Rob, you want to take 5 minutes and just give us your pitch. Just tell people why they should support your bid for president of the United Conservative Party of Alberta.
Well, Chris, I think that you opened this up with a pretty great perspective when you said, regardless of who the 4,000 plus people vote for president at our upcoming AGM at Expo Center in Edmonton, you're going to be in good hands. I have huge respect for Daryl. I consider him a friend. I think he's one of our great provincial CA presidents. And if he's your choice, fill your boots. I'm not going to have any issue with that whatsoever. I'll serve Daryl as a faithful volunteer within the party going forward. But I think that there is some value in consistency in the work that we've done on the creation of our election readiness plan to move towards 2027. And I feel very strongly like I am contributing to a united party. I just really do. I feel that I have good relationships with almost all of our 87 CA presidents, and that I look at them as the gauges as to where the wind is blowing and what thoughts are coming from their fellow local constituency association board members, who then in turn I look to as representing the local membership of the UCP in each of those 87, soon to be 89 CAs. I'd like to carry that work that has happened over the course of the last couple of years towards October of 2027. And something, Daryl mentioned, and I think it bodes a little bit of comment on my part. I've stood up to the Premier, and I've actually stood up to the caucus in ways that weren't very comfortable for me, and I'll continue doing it when it's necessary. I think that the support that was shown for the Bill of Rights last year was very, very easy to defend, because our party had a position already on all of those topics. It has been really important to me that when I take a position, even if it's in the media, it is a defensible position or defendable position, because it's already a position of the party. I took some heat for being in the CBC talking actually about one of Daryl's Injection of Truth events last year in talking about informed consent. But I was quoting a policy that our members had passed in the fall of 2023. Everything about the Bill of Rights had already been approved by our members in the fall of 2022 and 2023. So I am never taking a position that's my position. In fact, most people on our board don't even know what my position is on stuff, because I study and I follow what our party stands for based on what our members have actually said. And I'm not going to actually say something that is a position of the party that isn't actually the already stated position, either based on our governance manual or our policy manual or our bylaws. I am very, very committed to being a servant leader and committed to effective governance. And that's what you would get for another 2 years. So that would be my pitch. But like I say, if you vote for Daryl, I'm totally good with it. He's a great guy. He'll be a good president.
Rob, where does the authority of the party come from?
The authority of the party? It actually comes from our membership at the AGM, and then it comes from the board of directors between general meetings.
Well, the reason I asked that question, I knew the answer, but I want people to understand that when Rob is talking about these policies, it's not like a group of people sit around a table and they just make it up. It's people who show up and they use their voices. They stand in the microphone, they say their piece, and then we listen and then we vote. That's where the authority for these policies and this governance comes from. It comes from you folks. So don't ever let anybody tell you that your voice doesn't matter and it's all just whatever. No, it really does come from you. And if you want to experience it, please go to the AGM.
Well, and Chris, just to augment what you're saying there, and this is something Daryl and I've talked about many times, we've been disappointed by people in the past that are members of the party. Sometimes they're even members of caucus who have indicated that the folks that show up at our AGM are not representative of our party as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I think Daryl and I both are in full agreement that we take huge exception to that, particularly in these days when we're 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 plus members at our AGM. Any statistical course that you would take, any introductory statistics course would tell you that percentage of what our total membership is absolutely statistically significant as a reflection of our party membership. And I guess in my mind, I would say that if that's the case, when you've got a membership of anywhere between, say, 65,000 and 130,000, which is what we've had for members over the course of the last 3 years, I can't help but think that's a pretty solid representation of Albertans as a whole as well. So I think it's really important that people listen to what you just said, because when you are at our AGM, you're there as a UCP member, but you're there also as a voice of Alberta. And I think that's something I'm really proud of.
Okay. Daryl, you're up. You got 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, much of what Rob is saying, I concur with, because, I concur with the value of the voice of the members that come at the AGM. I mean, that is essential. That's where you hear from the members. That's where these policies get passed. Those policies have been vetted, 9 ways to Sunday. 10,000 or more hours of volunteer time has been put into thinking about these policies, and they've gone through various levels of approval and ultimately presented to the membership. So that's where the party gets its strength is from its members, which I 100% agree with. We get strength from our policies, which I 100% agree with. And I think that by putting the two together, that leads for how we see and how we expect the UCP government to manage the affairs of Alberta, because the AGM is representative of our party membership is representative of Alberta, and in that I feel that having the discussion on difficult topics is also representative of the province, and so we can't just short shift difficult topics in a political environment. Because right now, trust is so essential, and I feel that my particular perspective on unifying the coalition of Conservatives is that we need to make sure that all the voices seem to be heard, not just the 15 or 20%, but the vast majority of our party, which is represented probably at the AGM as well, are heard, and that means having the discussion. Now, it has to be respectful conversation. It has to be conversation that is constructive. It has to be something that allows for different views to be spoken. And I think that's where people forget is that we're not the yes person party. We just don't follow because someone gave us an orange ball to follow. We follow because we believe in the values of what being conservative is. And I think as many as 58% of Albertans fall squarely in that demographic. So I think we're in fairly good stead. Now, when I talk about being Alberta first, I feel that is a position that anyone who comes to Alberta enjoys the fruits of what is here, the vast majority of our resources and people, intellectual capital. They should always be willing to put Alberta first, regardless of where they came from or who they are, because this is the bread and butter. This is, the promised land. And now that you're here, you need to be Albertan. And to try to pretend that you're not, means that you missed the place you should have been. Maybe it should have been Manitoba or British Columbia. I'm not sure. But if you're coming for the wealth and you're coming for the opportunity, then you need to absorb yourself into being and representing Albertan. And there's some great apolitical organizations like I Am Albertan that really speak to what does it mean to be Albertan. And I think we have to look at that. Same time, I think when we get to this issue of election readiness, it's a all hands on deck team effort. I mean, this isn't going to be Rob's idea versus my idea. This is going to be a collective idea that rose us out there. It's going to be well orchestrated. It starts now. It doesn't start 30 days before the election. You're not going to find any difference, I believe, in Rob's approach or my approach on that particular point, because that is a very unifying factor. So I would appreciate people voting for me. I think I provide an assertive view on what it means to be conservative. I certainly respect Rob, and if he is the victor, then terrific. I'm happy to work with Rob as well. So the two of us, it isn't a mutual admiration club. What we have is respect for each other's position and our abilities to articulate our position, but also to actually have a position. And that's, I think, Chris, what you're pointing to is that people that show up, those are the people that are going to get to speak and speak up and speak out. And that's all we can hope for in a political organization, is that active membership that really gives its all.
Well, I got to say, gentlemen, I really appreciate the way that you guys are handling these conversations and debates. I want to point out, folks, there was no mudslinging, no rudeness, no nothing. Like this is what it's supposed to be like. And I, for one, am so sick of watching political debate that's nothing but mudslinging and fear-mongering. These guys are being honest. They're being respectful to each other. And I have no doubt that whichever way this goes, the party's going to be in good hands. And no, I'm not going to tell you who I'm going to vote for. The purpose of this episode of the Chris Sands Carey Show, except for he's right there, you can see him, was to facilitate this discussion so that you guys can decide on your own. I'm not going to push you either way, but I think if nothing else is accomplished, you've been given enough information that you can at least reach out to either of the men and ask them questions, which I know they're both available. And I guess, what we should do is maybe Rob and Daryl, can you just let people know how you're available if people have questions, or where they can go for more resource on your ideas and platform?
Rob, I'll go first. I'll give you the last word. So you can go to my website, which is komick.org. That's KOMICK.org. There I lay out everything that I talked about today. I've put out on the website. I am the one candidate that will have enough theme songs for an entire album of music. By the time my team is done there, they keep writing theme songs, but you can go there. So I would hope that you would visit there, and there is a contact tool there to ask questions. Also, Rob and I are going to take the opportunity to, have other debates in public. We're hoping to have one coming up in Red Deer next Wednesday, if that can come together. But other opportunities to be the two of us present. I mean, I don't think either one of us minds speaking at the same time, mostly because we would like people to be informed and to make an informed choice. So, Rob?
Thanks, Daryl. And following Daryl's lead, you guys can all go to my website at robsmithab.com. That's robsmithab.com. Or if you want to give me a call or shoot me a text, you can do so at 403-861-6884. That's 403-861-6884. And I'm happy to visit, happy to chat, answer any questions, anything you want.
There you have it. Just past 8:30. So Rob, you got time to prepare for your next thing. Daryl, you can get some beauty sleep. I'm going to do this. Oh, actually, I'm not going to do the same. I have another one of these to do right away. So no rest for the wicked, they say. Thanks again, gentlemen. I would like to, as a thank you for being such a gentleman and showing people what these debates are supposed to be like, and that you can be polite and cordial. I'd like to invite each of you and your families to the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, where supper will be on me. And I also sell Tums, but those won't be free. So I'm going to feed you, give you indigestion, and then you can buy the Tums because I'm a capitalist.
I take a pill for that. I'm happy to eat the wildest thing you got.
There you go.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it, Chris. Thank you, Rob.
Been fun. Good night. Well, there you go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I trust that you gain some knowledge. Didn't get to many of the questions. I tried to watch them and ask them in real time rather than putting them up on the screen, because it's hard to get a word in edgewise. The guys, they got a lot to talk about, and they really want you to know why they should be representative of the United Conservative Party of Alberta. And I want to remind you all, this is just one part of a huge political wheel. Party politics is different from government. The party is completely separate from government. The party, as we discussed, gets its authority from the members. That's you. You guys decide what direction the party goes in. You guys decide who's representing the party. Those people decide who's going to run as MLAs, those types of things. And then election time, when we nominate MLAs and they campaign, those are the people that go to the legislature specifically to make laws. That's what an MLA, a member of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, that's their job, and that's it, to make laws on our behalf. So you can see how the whole process is important. Your values and principles, they work their way through the whole thing, and they end up in the legislature making law that will affect your life. So no, this isn't some irrelevant thing. No, it's not just a weekend party at a hotel in Calgary or Red Deer or Edmonton or whatever. This is literally laying the groundwork and setting the foundation for what your province looks like. And no matter what political stripe you are, no matter what position you take on any of these things, if you really care, then you should be involved. Plain and simple. And I will point out, I've said this before, the reason we got in such a pickle and are in such a pickle right now, in regards to politics, is because we have allowed people who don't share our values or our morals or ideals to show up and be the deciding voices. We stayed silent, we stayed home while they showed up. And then we inherit the consequences of that. So if you're tired of that, like I am, get involved. Don't let anybody tell you not to be involved. Do your part. Or just shut up. Because if you don't get involved, what business do you have complaining about anything? And who doesn't like to complain about government now and then? Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for joining us, men, and Carrie. Hope you're doing well. Lots of well wishes and prayers for your daughter, who sounds like she's recovering nicely. And, thanks for being here with us in spirit. Night, everyone. Meow. Vote.